You're watching The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales. Streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
2, 1.
So this kid, Mike, he works at a movie theater, and he's been working there all summer. And he doesn't like the job. The manager's a jerk, and he's ready to quit. And but he's worked long enough to save up to buy himself a car. And now he's going off to college, and it's his last few days. He's there, and he's working the door. And this guy approaches with an elephant. Side by side, they just walk up to the door. The guy pulls out 2 tickets, and Mike's like, "You can't bring an elephant into the movies." And the guy's like, "What? Why not? I've got him a ticket." He says, "Because he's an animal, and you can't bring an animal into the movie theaters." The man goes, "Look, this is a circus elephant. He's extremely well trained. He does exactly what I tell him to do. He will come into the theater, he'll sit in the aisle, and he'll be fine. I promise you." Well, Mike's like, "You know what? I don't care anymore. So, all right, you bought a ticket for him. Bring him in." Well, the guy walks in with the elephant, and they go into the theater, and he gets him a bucket of popcorn, the whole thing. And he goes in, and Mike's got to see this. So he kind of peeks his head into the theater, and sure enough, the elephant's just sitting there in the aisle watching the movie. And at the funny parts, you see the elephant kind of shaking, and trunk kind of bouncing up and down like he's laughing. And at the sad part, you see Mike kind of sees a tear rolling down the elephant's eye. And he's just blown away by this. So at the very end, the movie ends, and the guy gets up, and the elephant gets up, and they go out of the theater. And Mike stops him on the way out. He goes, "You know, man, I got to be honest, I am really surprised. Not only was your elephant very good in the theater, but he really seemed to enjoy the movie." And the man just shakes his head in agreement and goes, "Yeah," which really surprises me because he hated the book. Stay tuned for the Dan Wickline Show. Welcome to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. I hope you're all having a great day. I see Triple B is here. I see Cool is here. Good to see you both. I see that John Spilotopoulos has re-signed up or is a new member, and we appreciate that. While we're here, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. Those are very helpful. And spread the word about the show. Tell a friend. We're still trying to get our subscribers up and our followers up. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so. And by the way, you want to stick around today. We got some good stuff. We got the Miss Jen will be here with What's in the Box. We got the Beardies are looking at a whole new batch of comics, and Sketch Up tonight with Mog and Mel, and some pretty great guests. So you want to stick around for all that. JD says, "Please like the show before Nick shows up. He beats us with reads if you don't." Yeah. It's kind of ugly. He gets he's one of those that, get yourself a Switch. You have to go out and pick your own. And yeah, it's not pretty. So, all right. What we're doing is, I told you we're changing the show up a bit. We're going to be doing news roundups on Tuesday. Those will probably be pre-recorded. We're not going to be doing a show on Wednesday. And on Thursdays, we're going to do what I'm calling the big show. It's going to be 60 minutes, maybe 90, depending on how much material I come up with. And we're going to do deep dives into topics, whether it's the latest news, it's a character, stuff like that. So that's going to be where we really focus. Hey, Ed, good to see you. Glad you made it. So today we are going to take a dive into the history of the Marvel comic character Bill Foster, also known as Black Goliath or Giant Man. He's got a really interesting and colorful history, so you'll want to stick around for that. It's a lot more than you would think. I mean, he seems like a character that, had like a little series in the 70s, and then, made an appearance in Civil War. But there's a lot more to the character than you realize. But before we get to that, of course, we're going to do the news. And there's quite a bit of news, starting off with Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds, of course, is currently filming Deadpool 3. And there have been quite a few leaked photos from the set. And we talked about them yesterday, how they're showing certain characters from the X-Men franchise that may be coming back, and that those would technically be spoilers. Well, Ryan Reynolds has taken to social media, like he does, in two different ways. First, he went out and basically asked for restraint from the online spoiler community, the people that post these videos and share these images and stuff. And what he wrote was, "Surprises are part of the magic of the theatrical movies. It's important for us to shoot the new Deadpool film in real, natural environments using practical effects as opposed to making the movie indoors and digitally. Telephoto lenses continue to spoil surprises and create a difficult situation for everybody. Here's hoping some of the websites and social channels hold back showing images before they're ready. The film is built for audiences to enjoy, and our high hopes is to preserve as much of that magic as possible for the finished film in the big screen. Part of the reason people post spoilers is because they're excited. I realize these aren't real world issues, and it's firmly in the good problems bucket. I love making this movie," and that's, he posted all that on Instagram. So he's just asking people to kind of maybe not put all the spoilers out there. And you know what? I did talk about them yesterday, but I tend not to. I tend to avoid set photos and stuff like that. We don't show the photos, and we might mention anything we learned from them, but it's very rare. But the other thing he did is he then started posting set photos himself that, well, I think Ryan Reynolds got a hold of Photoshop recently, because he's been doing silly stuff. Like there's that picture of Taylor Swift and Blake Lively posing together from New York. And it's a pretty, kind of a little sexy kind of picture of the two of them together. And Ryan may have gone in and replaced the faces on Tyler and Blake with the pictures of Travis Kelce and himself. And it's not the best photoshopping job in the world, but it's pretty damn funny. Well, he continued his photoshopping by taking some of the set photos that were leaked and adding to them. So one of them now has Steve Urkel in it. Another one has the cast standing around with a Predator. So there's little things like that. But my favorite, and probably the weirdest one, is there's a picture of somebody holding a sign, like a whiteboard. And I remember seeing the original photo. I don't think the whiteboard had anything on it, or if it did, it was nothing memorable. And he's replaced it with a reference to Wally, the cue card guy from Seth Meyers' late night show. if you're not a fan of Late Night with Seth Meyers, Wally holds his cue cards, but has kind of become his sidekick as well. So he talks to Wally. There's little bits and stuff with him. So it's basically what says, hold the cue cards up a little higher, Wally. Yeah. Oh, go back one. Can you? Yeah, right there. It says, hold the cue card up a little higher, Wally. And then I don't know what he added to that one, but there's the one with Mickey Mouse and a giant bag of cash. There's the one with the Predator. And there's Steve Urkel. So you see Ryan's having some fun. So, all right, let's move on to our next story. By the way, JD, thank you for grabbing that. Is he the one who gets killed in Civil War? Yes. Yes, Bill Foster does get killed in Civil War, and we will cover that. So, all right, let's go on to our next news story. And this has to do with the occasional author and convention goer, George R.R. Martin. And I say it that way because people are a little frustrated that they haven't got Winds of War yet, or Winds of Winter, the next Game of Thrones book. But supposedly Martin went and visited the set of the Game of Thrones spinoff House of the Dragon and got to see the first 2 episodes of season 2, and he's kind of given his verdict on it. Now, he's got his own blog, basically called Not a Blog, and he wrote, "All I have to say about this is, oh my God, I am no stranger to film sets. I have worked off and on in television and film since 1986, where I joined the staff of the Twilight Zone revival at CBS. I still recall the rush where I saw them building Stonehenge on the soundstage behind my office for an episode I'd written. And of course, I visited the Game of Thrones shoots in Belfast, Scotland, Morocco, and Malta. Those were incredible too, but nothing I have ever seen can compare with the Red Keep and Dragonstone sets they have built at Leavesden Studios in London. Huge, stunning, and so damn real that I felt as if I had gone through a time portal to medieval Westeros. I love castles, and I have visited dozens of actual medieval castles, keeps, and towers in my time, and none of the real castles I have ever seen can hold a candle or a torch to our Red Keep." Now, while he was there, Martin also said he spent 2 days locked in a room with Ryan Condal and his writing staff, which includes Sarah Hess, Ty Mickle, David Hancock, and Philippa Goslet, talking about the 3rd and 4th seasons of House of the Dragon. They were lively, fun discussions, and we got some good work done, though 2 days was not nearly enough. There is so much ground to cover that I'm not sure 20 days would have been enough. He then gave his opinion on the first 2 episodes of the new season, saying, "Of course, I am hardly objective when talking about anything based on my own work, but I have to say, I thought both episodes were just great, and they're not even finished yet. Dark, mind you, very dark. They make me cry. Now, I didn't cry myself, but one of my friends did. Powerful, emotional, gut-wrenching, heart-rending, just the sort of thing I like. What can I say? I was weaned on Shakespeare and loved the tragedies and histories played best of all." Now, House of the Dragon's 2nd season is expected to debut on HBO in the summer of 2024. Hey, Kenneth, good to see you. So, all right, moving on to a little Marvel news from a strange place. On the red carpet last night for the new film Poor Things, which stars Mark Ruffalo and Emma Stone, a reporter from Phase Zero asked Ruffalo about a recent deal between Disney and NBC Universal for Hulu. and asked if perhaps the distribution rights for a Hulk standalone movie may have changed since that deal. Now, the actor replied, "Not that I know of. I have been asked not to comment on it, specifically that. I mean, I hope one day they'll work it out. I think that'll be really cool. And I've been putting a lot of thought what it could be to be cool, but I don't know yet." Now, the distribution deal between Universal with Universal is the reason there hasn't been a solo movie since the Ed Norton film back in 2008. Even though Marvel Studios had the rights to put the Hulk into films and television shows all they want, they can't make a project that the Hulk is the lead character. So they couldn't do Planet Hulk, but they could do Thor Ragnarok and kind of squeeze Planet Hulk into it, which is why that happened that way. So, but there's been speculation that maybe Marvel would make buying the rest of Hulu and all that, that to happen, that getting the rights back to the Hulk and Namor solo movies would be part of it. But the fact that they not only does Ruffalo say he doesn't know, but that he was specifically asked not to comment becomes really interesting, because he's kind of one of the spoiler bros. So the fact that they felt it necessary to go and tell Mark, "Don't say anything," means that there might be some smoke there. There might actually be something going on there. So we will have to see. All right, moving on to our next story. Though this is slightly outside of our normal stories, I am absolutely fascinated by this one. A former employee of the Jacksonville Jaguars has been accused of stealing more than $22 million from the NFL team to fund a lavish lifestyle. According to court documents filed in the U.S. District Court this week, the court filings say that Amit Patel used the money to fund online gambling, pay for private travel and accommodations for himself and friends, as well as sports tickets, acquire a new Tesla car, a Nissan pickup truck, purchase cryptocurrency, and buy a property in Point Verde Beach, Florida. He also bought a Patek Philippe Nautilus watch, which is worth over $95,000. And he paid for all of this with proceeds of his fraud scheme. Now, according to the court documents, Patel is accused of wire fraud and illegal monetary transactions, stealing millions via the team's virtual credit card system over a 4-year period. Now, the fact that it took him 4 years to figure this out is just blows my mind. But a statement from the Jaguars reads, "We can confirm that in February 2023, the team terminated the employment of an individual named in the filings. Over the past several months, we have cooperated fully with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Middle District of Florida during their investigation and thank them for their efforts in this case. As we made clear in the charges, this individual was a former manager of financial planning and analysis who took advantage of his trusted position to covertly and intentionally commit significant fraudulent financial activity at the team's expense for personal benefit. This individual had no access to confidential football strategy, personnel, or other football information. The team engaged experienced law and accounting firms to conduct a comprehensive independent review, which concluded that no other team employees were involved in or aware of his criminal activities." Now, Patel, for his part, just waived the whole indictment thing where they get a grand jury and stuff, and just accepted that he was going to be going on trial. And, so they're just going by what the prosecutors are accusing him of and going from there. But there's so much to take from this. First thing, you really could have started this with a Florida man, and I love Florida man stories. But the fact that it is important to the Jaguars, to make clear that this guy had no knowledge of the actual football activities or strategy. So the fact that they weren't paying attention to $22 million being stolen over 4 years, to them is not nearly as important as long as the guy doesn't have the playbook and could sell that. To me, that's absolutely hilarious. And the fact the guy got away with it for 4 years, oh man. All right, a couple more quick news stories and then we'll take a break. What's $22 million to an NFL team? Good point. They do now sell for billions. So, the Panthers sold for over. Well, no, it was the Redskins are the most recent, and they sold for over $1 billion. I know that. So Netflix has announced that Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon: A Child of Fire will get a slightly earlier release than planned. Originally, it was going to drop at midnight Pacific time on December 22nd. They're now moving it up about 5 hours so that it's actually going to debut at 7 p.m. Pacific time on December 21st. So if you want to watch it, you don't have to stay up until the wee hours of the morning to see it, which just makes a ton of sense. This is Disney's trying to do that too. And I expect that it's going to become the norm, because if you've got a show that people are excited to see, put it on at a normal time so that, it's not debuting at 3 a.m. on the East Coast and people are waking up and suddenly their Twitter feeds are full of spoilers and these people haven't even had a chance to have breakfast yet. So Rebel Moon: A Child of Fire will actually drop at 7 p.m. Pacific time, which is 10 p.m. Eastern, which still is kind of late. I think I would have gone 6 and 9. So at 9 o'clock, you could have the time to watch it before going to bed. But I think it's a good move. So, and finally, this story struck me as maybe not the best idea in the world. The film Oppenheimer, the story about the guy who built the atom bombs that were dropped on Japan, will get a theatrical release next year in Japan. But the part that I couldn't make up, the part that just almost feels like somebody is trolling the world, is that the independent film company that's going to distribute this movie in Japan is called Bitter Ends. Let you guys think about that. We're going to go ahead and take a break. We'll be back.
Why was Princess Zelda sad after watching a bunch of YouTube videos? She couldn't find a link in the description. We'll stop if you subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's super easy. Click subscribe and click the bell when you do. And thanks for supporting the EXP.
Comic Collectibles is a pretty straightforward show. You got Rex here, he sells the comics, and you got Rockin' Robbie, he knows about the comics. And finally, John, well, no one really knows what John does. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a great guy, but he just keeps showing up. Come to think of it, I don't even really know how he gets in here. Anyway, awesome comics, rare books, rarer signatures, slabbed books, and amazing cover sketches by Ken Hazer and others. Simple formula, you want the comics, you buy the comics. To sum up, Rex sells the comics, Robbie knows the comics, and John, who might possibly be a ghost. I mean, seriously, has anyone ever seen him show up or leave? Comic Collectibles with Rex and John, Mondays from 6 to 8 Eastern on The Experience. Comic Culture and Sales. There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit comicshoplocator.com to find a store near you.
There's a comic book universe on the streets of Cleveland. Hero Tomorrow Comics is debuting
Violante, the Undead.
Get the new issue or the entire acclaimed library live on Kickstarter.
I'm coming for you, Cleveland.
Details at clevelandsuperhero.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. This is the big show, and we are going to dive into the character of Bill Foster, but this just popped up over on Deadline, and I think it's fascinating. Last week we talked about the fact that the Only Murders in the Buildings, which airs on Hulu, was now going to get a television run on ABC, which, you know, might seem a little odd. Like, well, how many people really watch ABC that don't watch Hulu? What's the audience like? Well, a company called Tubular, which is a YouTube measurement partner, has actually figured it out, and it talks about the overlap between certain streaming services and their main networks. And it's pretty fascinating. Now, the one that has the biggest overlap is actually Peacock and NBC, that supposedly there's a 45% overlap. So 45% of the people who watch Peacock watch NBC live and vice versa. There's, you know, it's a shared audience. The next one is Paramount Plus, which only has a 17%. That's a huge drop with CBS. Now, I also think Paramount Plus might be the least. I don't know, maybe Peacock is lower. I don't know which. But Paramount Plus seems very much the home of Star Trek and not much else. I mean, there's a few other things on there, but it's mainly the home of Star Trek. So if you're a Star Trek fan, you have Paramount Plus. Otherwise, I mean, and CBS seems to be where you go to watch cop shows, and, you know, it's where your grandmother is watching and your older parents. But where it gets really interesting is that Hulu and ABC, which are the ones involved with Only Murders in the Building, there is only a 12% overlap, which means that the majority of ABC's audience doesn't watch Hulu. You know, when 82 or 88% of your audience doesn't watch it, then there's a good chance that they've never seen the show. And Martin Short and Steve Martin and Nathan Lane and, I mean, all these different, you know, actors and stuff, that there's a good chance it's going to do well on the network. But what's interesting is that Hulu is not the lowest overlap. The lowest is actually Disney Plus to ABC. And I know Hulu and Disney Plus are kind of one and the same now. But Disney Plus only has a 9% overlap with ABC. So I find that all fascinating. I'm going to dig deeper into that. That report just posted. So JD says, I wish I could play the Big Show's entrance theme right there. Sad part is I don't know what the Big Show's entrance theme is, but thank you. That would be kind of fun. All right, let's get into our deep dive. Now, again, the length of the show is going to basically go until I run out of material. So now, why are we talking about Bill Foster? Why do we even care about Bill Foster? Well, the reason is that in an upcoming episode of What If, we're going to get to see the character of Bill Foster in action. This is the episode that we've seen some clips for it, and it has like a young Peter Quill who either gets taken straight to Ego unlocks his power, and then he gets taken back to Earth. Or what I think is probably going to happen is that somehow his powers get triggered while he's on Earth, and suddenly he's running around with these godlike powers, and Earth's mightiest heroes at the time have to try to stop him. And what becomes that now, it's not it. I think the title is actually "What If Peter Quill Battled Earth's Mightiest Heroes," because they can't say the Avengers because there are no Avengers at that point. So, Star Trek Channel plus Frasier. That's right, Frasier's on there. I watch Frasier on TikTok in little clips. That's all I've seen of it. But so the team that they're going to have in it are, at that point, Hank Pym as Ant-Man, of course. T'Chaka will be Black Panther. Bucky Barnes, it will be there as the Winter Soldier. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but he's there as the Winter Soldier. Wendy Lawson was Annette Bening's character in Captain Marvel. She will be there as Star Force, even though she's kind of the original Captain Marvel or Marvel. She's going by the name Star Force. We'll get Thor in it, and then we'll get Bill Foster as Goliath. And we met Foster in live action in Ant-Man and the Wasp, as played by Lawrence Fishburne. Foster was a former colleague of Pym's that worked on a growing formula and had even used it on himself, making to the height of 21 feet tall. They even talk about it. He kind of compares size with Scott, who gets up to 65 feet. Bill, the best he did was 21 feet. Now, it turns out later in the movie that Foster's actually working with Ava Starr, a.k.a. the Ghost, and trying to help her deal with the quantum energy that she got blasted with because of Hank and stuff. So by the end of it, though, he helps the heroes out, and we see that he's a good guy in the end. We also learn in the movie that he was Pym's partner, and I say partner in quotes because he refers to his partner, and Hank seems pretty against the term partner. But his partner on a project called Goliath, and it appears that, we kind of get the impression that through the three movies that Hank never grew. He never became Giant Man. That he stuck with the shrinking and left the growing to Bill, and then eventually Scott figures it out. Now, I don't know if that turns out to be true, but that's the impression that I got while watching the movies and stuff. Now, in the animated episode, it looks like he's going to be going by the name Goliath, I believe. But it's going to be Fishburne returning to voice the part. He said in an earlier an interview a while ago that he was returning to the character to voice it, and that's what this is. So it's interesting that they bring in Bill Foster, so you get a Giant Man, and you get an Ant-Man, and you get all the other characters. So that I'm looking forward to. But who is Bill Foster? Because, like I said, he's a pretty interesting character that had his own series in the 70s and ends up associated with a lot of other Marvel heroes. He also plays a pivotal role in the comic book version of Civil War and was around for quite a while before ever donning the costume for the first time. So let's take a deep dive into the history of Bill Foster. Now, he was born William Barrett Foster in Watts, California, where he excelled in school. He got into Caltech, where he earned a PhD in biochemistry, and he married his college sweetheart, Claire. Now, we're going to get back to her because it turns out she's important. Now, the two weren't married long, and just while they were in college, they got divorced, and Foster found himself working in the plans and research division of this little company called Stark Enterprises. Now I can't get the Big Show theme out of my head. Now, we need to switch to another character here. Hank Pym at this point he was originally a founding member of the Avengers as Ant-Man and Giant Man, but he leaves the team for a while. But when he comes back, he's got a new costume and a new name. And this is in Avengers number 28 in May of 1966. And with this new costume, he's going by the name Goliath. And while the problem is that his size-shifting powers are now putting a strain on his body, so he's not doing it that often. Problem is that Janet Van Dyne gets abducted, the Wasp, by the Collector. And Pym, of course, dons his suit to go with the team to save the love of his life. And he spends too much time in the Goliath form at 10 feet tall and bigger, so that after he saves Janet and tries to shrink back down, he ends up passing out and discovers that he is stuck at 10 feet tall. He can't go any lower. Now, what's interesting is Pym isn't afraid to actually ask for help. And that's funny because in a lot of comics and stuff, nobody ever asks for help. He reaches out to Tony Stark. Tony Stark goes, I know this brilliant biochemist that works for me. I'm going to send him over and the two of you can work together. You can have him for as long as you need him. And that's Bill Foster. So Bill Foster appears in Avengers number 32 for the first time in 1966. And he's basically created by Stan Lee and Don Heck. And he comes in to help Pym refine the Pym particles, I don't think they're called Pym particles in the comics. It's a serum that he has. Now, while the two work together on the problem, other villains tend to pop up because it's comics. And the first one they deal with is this racist hate group called the Sons of the Serpents, who are going around and attacking people of color. And one of the people they attack, of course, is Bill Foster. Now, Hank wants to figure this out, and he ends up enlisting the aid of the Avengers, but he also wants to kind of get inside this group. So he agrees to speak at one of their big meetings, and this just pisses Bill Foster off. He storms out, wants nothing to do with Hank, thinking that he's going to basically is in league with these Sons of the Serpents. Well, it turns out when he does the speech, he condemns them for their hatred and just goes off on them and ends up with the Avengers capturing the ones that actually are doing these beatings and stuff and stops the group. Once Foster finds out about this, he, of course, returns so that he can help Pym get things back in order. So that's the first part of Bill Foster's connection to Hank Pym. Let's see. Pastor Michael says, Bill Foster working for Stark Industries is interesting. I wonder how many other heroes worked for other heroes like that. I know Quasar worked for the Fantastic Four. Yeah, or Project Pegasus was another place that a lot of heroes end up either working for or were working at before they became heroes. Or S.H.I.E.L.D. is another place. So they do like to tie all that together. Particles are more sciencey. Yes, they are. Particularly. Nice, Ed. So the next thing that happens to Foster and Pym actually doesn't involve them directly. Janet Van Dyne runs into an old friend at a bank, or runs into an old friend. The old friend's ex-boyfriend, who is insanely jealous, sees the two of them and immediately decides he doesn't care about his ex-girlfriend anymore. He's now infatuated with Janet Van Dyne. And of course, he also happens to be the supervillain, the Living Laser, who then, of course, tries to abduct Janet. It really does seem like the early days of the Avengers, Janet was basically girl hostage, which is a horrible way to write a female character. And I'm glad that's not as commonly used anymore, but it was really bad in the 60s. But, and of course, the Avengers try to rescue her. They get captured. Hank has to go in as Goliath to try to save her. And he himself is on the verge of getting captured when he shrinks down. And it turns out that he and Bill Foster had actually solved the problem and restored the shrinking powers. And that's what he was able to use to save the day. And even though they had successfully completed their project, Foster and Pym decide to continue working together. And that's how that episode wraps up. And we don't see Bill Foster again for 9 years, something like that. And when he shows up again, it's completely different. He shows up in the pages of Luke Cage Power Man number 24, written by Tony Isabella and George Tuska. And when you read this, you have to question if they had read the original issues, because the character is so different in his appearance in Power Man that you really have to believe that the editor never knew that he appeared before, and then they try to fix it after. But what happens in the pages of Luke Cage is Luke is dating a woman named Claire Temple. And you probably know the name Claire Temple from the Marvel series, the Marvel Netflix series. That's Rosario Dawson's character. Well, in the comics, Claire Temple is dating Luke Cage. And one day she gets this letter and suddenly leaves a note for Luke saying, "I have to go, don't come looking for me." And she just goes. But shortly after, she gets to where she's going, and she sends a postcard to Luke saying, "I'm fine," and there's a return address on it. And of course, Luke uses it to track her down. When he gets out to California, he goes to the hotel where she's staying at, and the guy running the hotel says, "Oh, I know her. She's spending a lot of time at the circus down the street." We go down to the circus, and while Luke is checking things out, there's this little accident, and the trapeze artists are in danger, and Luke leaps in and saves the trapeze artist. And savvy readers will look at these trapeze artists and go, "I think I've seen them before." But that'll come up later. So then Luke finds Claire, they embrace, they kiss, and suddenly Bill Foster shows up. Now, Bill Foster at this point is wearing a costume and is going by the name of Black Goliath. And supposedly now he's stuck at 15 feet tall, cannot reduce his size, and has taken up working at the circus as, in the circus as this giant guy, to make money, to fund his research, to figure out how to undo the fact he's stuck at 15 feet. Now, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because why would he be stuck at 15 feet if he figured out how to save, the problem for Hank? But that's neither here nor there for now. What happens next, of course, is Black Goliath sees Power Man kissing on his girl, and they fight like you do in a 1970s comic. And the fight gets interrupted when the ringmaster shows up with his circus of crime and uses his hypno hat to take over both Black Goliath and Luke Cage. And well, what happens there is we discover that the trapeze artists are actually the trapeze artists from the crime circus. And when Luke snaps out of it enough to fight his way out, the ringmaster has Black Goliath attack him, but the trapeze artist whose life Luke saved steals the hat and uses it to free both of them, and because he felt he needed to pay him back for saving his life. And then the two heroes kick all the circus people's butts, and there's a happy ending, and Claire goes back with Luke. And it's just a really weird issue because it doesn't fit in to the rest of what happens to Bill Foster. Yeah, all of this was before, Pastor Mike, all of this was before Hank Pym turned into Yellow Jacket. This was the 60s that this took place. Yellow Jacket didn't appear, I want to say in the 70s, but I don't know that off the top of my head. Oh, the Living Laser, the same prime Silver Age hokiness right there. Oh, some of the other villains he fights are just as bad. Now, we're going to move on with, let's take a quick break, and we come back. We're going to get into Black Goliath #1. So we'll be right back.
Join the party. Head over to our link tree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.
Symphonic verses, Nocturne's romance. A song of romanticized darkness, dreaming dead by sleep.
According to a statistic that I just made up, people spend 4 hours a day changing the television channel. People who watch The Experience don't do that. Save yourself a ton of time by tuning into The Experience and enjoying our new original programming 7 days a week. And then tell your friends. Think about the money they could save on batteries in the remote alone just by tuning into The Experience. Find out more by scanning the QR code below.
Welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. Remember to stick around for What's in the Box, SketchUp, and the comic book Beardies in some form of order. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons, and let's continue with the deep dive into Bill Foster. Now, though he had made this costume and dual identity for himself, Foster wasn't sure he wanted to be a hero at all or even wanted to fight crime. Actually, it turns out he also wasn't unemployed. He didn't need to work at the circus. He wasn't stuck at 15 feet tall. All of that was a lie. He did it to try to get Claire back. Really, this is where we start with this hero getting his own series. Just lies. And the scary thing is, if you could see that, oh yeah, Tony Isabella wrote this story here in Power Man, and then somebody sat down to write the new Black Goliath series and went, oh my God, what happened over here? I got to fix all this, get him back to where he was. Tony wrote that one too. He wrote both of them. So he took him all the way over here and then went, oh no, bring him back. Anyway, so it's actually a phone call with Hank Pym that encourages him to stay, actually become a hero. That, and he got somebody tried to mug him. But in the pages of Black Goliath, he fought a bunch of different criminals. The first one being a guy named Atom Smasher, who hit him with a radioactive ray, which turns out to be kind of important later on. There's also Warhawk, Vulcan. He actually gets to take on Stiltman from the Daredevil comics, except for now, Stiltman suddenly has this ray gun called a Z-Ray, different from the Atom Smasher from DC. See, Marvel and DC, they openly use each other's characters' names as long as they're not going to have their own comic, because you can't really trademark a name, but you can't copyright a name like that, but you can trademark it. So it's kind of like the whole Shazam thing. Pastor Michael says, right, because lying and tricking women really wins over their hearts. It truly does. Back in the 70s, it was right up there with flowers and chocolates and big friggin' lies. I think it was number 3 on the list. Until you get caught. Yeah. So Stiltman, who's always been kind of a joke of a villain, shows up, but he's got this Z-Ray gun that he zaps Black Goliath with, along with 2 other people, and they get thrown into another dimension where they meet aliens and have to rebuild technology to get them home. And it's like, where the hell did this story come from? But, and he also took on a guy called the Hijacker. So it was all very weird. And the whole thing ran for 5 issues. So all of that took place in 5 issues. So his whole time in another dimension, taking on Atom Smasher and Warhawk and Vulcan and Stiltman and the Hijacker, 5 issues. Now, later on, he would show up in Marvel 2-in-1, where he would become friends with Ben Grimm, the Thing. He also assisted the Champions, the team of heroes from Los Angeles. And this is just a mind-blowing story, because in the Black Goliath series, Bill Foster is in charge of the Stark Labs, and he gets sent a box that says, do not open without Tony Stark's express permission. And of course, the labs get broken into and the box gets stolen. And you would think that it is suddenly this box, it's like the briefcase from Pulp Fiction. We never, what the hell's in the box? Well, we don't find out in Black Goliath. We don't find out till later that it ties into like another comic from the past altogether. And what it is that the Stranger, that weird cosmic character, had built a bomb that was going to take over the universe and then slowly crush it, and was talked out of it by the sacrifice of this one doctor. And he just left the bomb on Earth, just unactivated, but somehow it gets activated, and the Champions and Bill Foster and I think the Defenders get involved, and they have to stop it. And the Stranger comes back trying to stop this bomb from going off. But yeah, so you've got this weird plot device that gets brought up in Black Goliath, and then when the series gets canceled, it gets dropped. And then suddenly in Champions and Defenders, they end it. The 70s were amazing at Marvel Comics. They really were. Now, from there, Dr. Foster would join the staff of Project Pegasus, like everybody does, a government semi-secret energy research. I love the term semi-secret. It means we all know about it, but we pretend we don't. And while there, he, of course, revealed his identity of Black Goliath to the Thing, who at the time was working for Project Pegasus. And in the process of answering an emergency alarm, Foster decides to change his name to Giant Man because Ben Grimm goes, you don't have to call yourself Black Goliath. We get it. You could just be Giant Man. After working at Project Pegasus for a short time, Foster reveals that he's dying of radiation poisoning that he had gotten while fighting the Atom Smasher all the way back in his first issue. And even though he had continued his attempt to distinguish himself as a crime fighter, on one occasion actually teaming up with Spider-Man to go up against the Meteor Man, there would come to a point where the effects of the radiation was too much. He wasn't able to save himself and was dying. But it turns out that Jessica Drew had an immunity in her blood that would save him, but it would also eliminate that immunity from her blood. So Spider-Woman sacrifices her immunity ability to save Bill Foster through a blood transfusion, which was another thing that Marvel loved to use in the 60s and 70s. It's also how She-Hulk was a blood transfusion. It was like suddenly pseudoscience is out the window, and now we're just doing blood transfusions. So the transfusion had received from Drew had managed to arrest his cellular decay and save his life, but after he had been so treated, thinking his cellular structure had already been too severely decaying from his radiation poisoning to withstand the strain of science changing, Foster gives up being Giant Man for a long time. But he does eventually return when he's assisting the West Coast Avengers. So this guy has really gotten around. He's like, the guest star a la, we need a scientist character. Let's bring in Giant Man. So he assists the West Coast Avengers in a battle against the High Evolutionary. And this is kind of important because this is all during the Evolutionary War in the Savage Land. And that will play a part later on. He defeated Dr. Nemesis and the evil version of Goliath, Eric Jostin, in their scheme. He would then give up the name Giant Man when Hank Pym wanted to start using it again. So that's when he started using Goliath without the identifier on the front. 60s radiation, 70s blood transfusion, 80s toxic waste, 90s DNA. Yep, that's pretty much accurate, Pastor Michael. Not too long after that, Goliath's ionic powers were disrupted in a battle against the West Coast Avengers. This caused an energy disruption, which allowed a race of extra-dimensional creatures, the Cosmosians, to attack Earth. Although the creatures were ultimately repelled, the energy disruption and effects of the Pym particles affected all who had ever been exposed to them, except Hank Pym, causing them to lose control of their growth or shrinking powers. After losing his powers, Dr. Foster joined the staff of the Center of Disease Control. In that capacity, he helped the Avengers deal with a bioweapon near Mount Rushmore. So he has his powers, he loses his powers, he gets his powers, he loses his powers. You get it. Now, at this point, he's lost his powers, yet he puts I think somebody forgot that, and he puts the Goliath costume on again, along with this new suit. He starts, has a new suit, but he starts being Goliath again. This is, again, he doesn't have the black anymore. He's just Goliath. And he helps this thing with a supervillain while they're trying to track down the Hulk because they need Dr. Banner to help save Spider-Man. It's another whole thing. And then during the so he does these little appearances, but then comes Civil War, which is Marvel, the actual comic book version of Civil War. Foster ends up on the side of Captain America and the anti-registration Secret Avengers. He actually goes by the name of Rockwell Dodsworth, which I have no idea why. And he subsequently appeared briefly among this cavalcade of African-American superheroes at the wedding of Black Panther and Storm. But later on, Foster ends up fighting the clone of Thor during Civil War and is killed. Since this proved not to be possible to reduce his body size, he has to be buried at this new larger size that he ends up getting this ability to grow larger during the whole Evolutionary War thing. Tony Stark pays for him to be buried over 38 burial plots. But his death is actually a key moment in Civil War, and it shifts the balance of power, making a lot of the people who are either neutral or on Iron Man's side switch sides and joins Cap's team, including Invisible Woman, the Human Torch, Black Panther, Storm, and Spider-Man. Now, so his death was pretty much the catalyst to bring Civil War to an end. That name rolls off the tongue. Yes, it does. So, all right. Let's look at his power. Bill Foster's superpowers are a result of his biochemical formula containing PIM particles. So he took the PIM particles and made them better. He has the ability to increase his size into gigantic levels by psionically drawing mass from an extra-dimensional source while gaining immense strength and durability in this height. Now, the extra mass returns to the source dimension as he decreases size. Now, the process of the height alteration is fatiguing, making Foster more vulnerable to harm if he does a lot of successive changes. Now, originally, Foster was only capable of growing to about 15 feet tall, and he could lift about 5 tons at that size, which is really impressive. But after he got his powers back during the Evolutionary War, he could actually grow up to 25 feet. Now, Foster hasn't really appeared outside of comics that often. He showed up in an episode of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, also voiced by Fishburne. He also appeared in 3 video games, Marvel's Ultimate Alliance 2, Marvel's Superhero Squad Online, and Lego's Marvel Avengers. So that's really the deep dive into the character. And we were going to do a key collectibles segment, but I didn't have time to do a full one. So I just want to cover a couple of the books that we did. I gave JD these covers really late. All right, he does have them. Okay, the first one here, this is Avengers 32. This is the first time we see Bill Foster. And of course, this one can go up to as high as $85 in really good condition. I'm just going to do the high-end prices here. The next one, Luke Cage Power Man number 24. This will go up to about $50 on the high end. So if you got one of these, you're in luck. Black Goliath number 1, the next one on our list. This one can fetch up to about $22 in good condition. I have the set. I actually did track these down and buy them. We have Marvel 2-in-1 number 55. Now, this is when he starts working with the Thing and takes on Nucleo and Atom Smasher. This is where we see the new costume. This one goes for about $6 on the high end. So if you're looking to pick up your Bill Foster stuff, and then his death in Civil War number 4, this one only goes for $5 on the high end. So there's a couple really good value picks at the end in case people suddenly decide Bill Foster is my jam and I need to start covering that. So, all right. So as you can see, we went a little past our normal time, and that's kind of what we're going to do on Thursdays from now on. it's going to go until I run out of material. I'm going to put everything together, and we'll go anywhere from an hour to 90 minutes. And then on Tuesdays will be a pre-recorded news update. So, and then we'll kind of reevaluate this at the end of the year into the new year and see what we do. Yeah, we do thank you guys for tuning in. Pastor Mike, Ed, Triple B, Cool Gamer, Kenneth, all of you guys, I appreciate you tuning in, hitting those like and subscribe buttons. You did hit those buttons, right? And thank you guys for sharing this, this show out there. And, again, I appreciate it. Are you still doing your Sunday night show? Yes. Jim and I will continue to do the show. We'll do it for the next 2 weeks, and then we're going to take the 2 weeks of holiday off because it's like Christmas Eve and then New Year's Eve, the 2 Sundays in a row, and then we'll be back in the new year. So we will be doing Pop Go the Writers for the next 2 weeks. So, yeah. All right, guys. Thank you again for tuning in. I will see you all next week. Have a great night and stick around. What's in the box? Comic Book Beardies and Sketch Up tonight. See you later.
Do you remember what it was like when you were a little kid and you got a letter in the mail? Now imagine that letter was filled with information about your favorite shows, pop culture questions, links to things you're going to want to see later, and even sneak peeks at upcoming programming here on The Experience. That's what the EXP mailing list is. Every week, we send you sneak peeks, information, and all of the relevant links for all of the shows you want to see. Sign up now on our website or scan the QR code that's on your screen right now.